Hi, welcome to the 8th edition of Mugs and Hugs, Conversations in Education. I'm Heidi Marlinghaus, and this is Jennifer Ozgur.
Yep, that's right.
And today we're featuring Cristina Sagray.
Hi.
So I'm going to jump right in. Cristina, I'm going to just say a tiny bit about how I know you. You were a parent in my class for 2 years. I taught a 4th grade, and then I looped again in 5th grade, and your son was in my class. And I had the pleasure of watching you work with children and teach growth mindset to children and different skills, the whole set of skills that, you know, these kids have never been exposed to as far as just learning how to deal with some struggles in the classroom. And I found you to be a really amazing parent and an amazing teacher, even though that's not your career. I found you to be an amazing teacher. So I thought it would be great to talk to you today and hear a lot about you.
Sounds great. Looking forward to it. I brought a mug.
Yay. We like our mugs. So if somebody was to look you up on the internet, what would they find?
So for right now, you would probably find my main job would be the first thing, which I'm an accountant. I got my master's in accounting later on in life. And additionally, you'd probably find my Pinterest because I'm crafty, my Facebook and see my family. And then hopefully, inevitably, one of the things I have told Heidi that I am inevitably hoping to start is a little bit of a YouTube channel called Dyslexic Mom, where I talk transparently about what it's like to be a parent raising children with learning differences when you yourself have learning differences, and talk about how I support my kids, how I've dealt with my own issues, and how I support the staff that work with my kids, and support how they can support their learners as well.
Yeah, and having been one of those staff members that you worked with, I really appreciated the way you came in with such a positive lens. And, you know, as a teacher, teachers are supposed to know everything, and we actually don't know everything, and we have to learn just like everyone else. And you know, when you came in with a lot of kindness and a lot of support, and you taught me, where sometimes the teacher-parent relationship can be a little contentious. If the parent sees something that the teacher's not doing, and there's never been any of that. You have a very positive way about you, and how you interact with all people and the way you parent. So I just love that.
Well, and I've got to say, when we were getting to know each other before we started recording, I did not know how you were connected. And now that I realize that, I was like, wow, like, it is not some hierarchical type of thing. It is just two women, two mothers, two educators of youth, just coming together and collaborating and discovering the joys of the children. So that I find that so inspiring just already. So thank you.
You guys are gonna start making me blush soon.
Well, yeah, and actually, you know, even as a teacher, I like to be collaborative. And when I was at that particular school for 2 years, I didn't have a ton of collaboration with my team. So I was able to, you know, bounce ideas off of Cristina. It's like, hey, what do you think of this? Or, hey, do you have any ideas for that? And, you know, she was always ready to go with some insight that she had. It was extremely helpful. Plus, I was only at the school for 2 years, so I didn't know the students. And it being a parent participation school, Cristina knew every single one of these students and, you know, what they needed to thrive and what kind of triggered them. And she supported me in that way too, to learn about my students more.
I think it's really hard because when you're a parent participation school, you come into the classroom and you get usually by 4th and 5th grade, there's no parents in the classroom. Most of my kids at other schools, that's when they ask parents to not come in the classroom. So having us come in, it's really kind of this weird thing where you get a window, but it's not an actual complete lens of what the teacher is like when you're not there, or the students are like when you're not there. But you get to observe things. And my thought has always been that you support the team that you're working with, that you talk with them and with respect, kindness, and care, while also just finding out how you can support them. I mean, my constant question from my children to my children's teachers to the resource team is, how can I support you? Because the biggest thing that I think we forget to ask is that they need support as well. They need us to be able to, and the only person who can tell us is them, that Heidi was the only one who could tell me how I could support her as a teacher, as a parent, what conversations I needed to have at home with my kids. And that could only happen if I asked her that question. And I think it's so hard. It's so important to ask that question, to say that. And I think she definitely felt that. And that not only help her, but help support the other students, because you might see something that somebody missed. We're all human. We're all learning. I will say I definitely appreciated how much Heidi was always willing to learn. She was always open to anything I ever said. She was always willing to accept my thoughts, which I appreciate so very much, because sometimes you're having to be a little more persuasive if you have an opinion that might not be, party line. Like, can we maybe try this? And some parents are like, well, I like to do it this way. She was always like, sure, I'll try it. Like, she was always very flexible with wanting to try new things. And I so appreciate that. That was one thing that was very helpful, because when you have a child that's a different learner, you have to ask for modifications. You can't do the same things that everyone else can, and that's okay. I mean, to this day, I can't do a word scramble, and I'm in my 40s. It's not going to happen. I don't think anything's going to change. But hearing that and hearing that feedback of how you can accommodate that child and having a teacher be constantly receptive is huge. It's a huge difference.
Well, and, I've been teaching, this is my 21st year. I'm in Pennsylvania. I had never heard of parent participation schools. I didn't know what that is. You're out in the West Coast. So, don't know if that's something that we want to talk about here. If it happens, that's awesome. And I think that's something that needs to be a conversation, is why don't we know about this? Like, what is it, and why, if it's working? I hear such great things about it in California. Why is that not something we know about in PA? So I just find that very interesting.
Well, I will say, I have family from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, so I know the area well. My parents are from there. But as a native Californian, I didn't know about them till my son was going into kindergarten, and someone recommended I check out Discovery. And I didn't go there until he was in first grade. He didn't get in his first year, but I didn't know about parent participation. And then I found out all these people I knew were already in parent participation. All these people I grew up with whose kids were a little older than mine were like, oh yeah, we're at this school and I'm at this school, and they all knew about it. So it's not just that you're just a back east maybe thing. It's also like, in the state, I didn't even know about it till it became a conversation. It's not as widely known.
It was the same for me, Cristina. I was in parent co-op for preschool, and I thought it ended at preschool. Right? It was like, well, we're just off to public school now. And it was a neighbor who was talking to me, and they had a bench that said village, and then whatever school year, 2008 or something. And I was asking her, well, what school is your children going to? And so she started telling me about it, and she's like, you should try it. You would love it. And so I looked into it, and that's when I realized, oh my gosh, in the Bay Area, we've got like 5 of these schools.
So many.
No idea.
So many.
And I was a teacher, right? Like, and not only that, but Cupertino had McAuliffe, and I had taught in Cupertino, but I didn't understand that McAuliffe was a parent participation school. I knew it was alternative. That's how people would word it. It's different. But I didn't realize that it was what it was until I went into Village and listened at their parent night, and I was like, whoa, this is what I've always thought a school should look like and feel like. And then I walked through the classrooms, and I was like, whoa.
Yeah,
so that's how I ended up in that type of school with my children. Should we jump into the Fast 5?
Let's do it.
We say they're fast, but they never are. So we'll see how it goes. So Cristina, my first question for you is, what has your proudest moments been working with children, or with yourself in your own learning, and what do you contribute to your success?
I spent a lot of time thinking about this, because this is a tough question, because in my life, I can't measure things in big moments. I measure them in little moments. Being a person with learning differences, you face so many day-to-day challenges. Most students like me have experienced more failure by 5th grade than some kids experience their entire scholastic career. So I realized one way that has changed me is that I see it in little moments, little successes that happen, or several successes. It's like they keep growing. I mean, it started with like from earning a necklace in the resource room because I was the first one to get 500 points, and they gave us an Avon necklace that was a butterfly on it that I wore when I graduated high school. I graduated college and got my master's degree to remind myself I have come this far. Whether it's like spending some time with my kids and seeing them have an aha moment, whether it's with me or with another person, working with students and have one draw you a picture because you've inspired them, like little things. There's all these little moments that happen that I think that I measure my life more by than like, this was the big moment that changed. It's always like, okay. And I continuously look forward, like, what's the next one going to be? And how many times am I going to have to tumble before I get there? Because I'm going to get up every time. And that's why I think the biggest thing that's contributor of my success is when I read the book Grit, it by, I think, Angela Duckworth, is it? I'm always afraid to say names wrong, but she just talked, I realized perseverance and grit were the superpowers that got me there, were the things that got me there. It wasn't a term that was acknowledged as much then, but I had to pick myself up multiple times and try again. So much so that I have a friend who quoted as saying, "You are unnaturally comfortable and okay with failing. You just try again." And she's like, it's not everyone else does. And I'm like, okay, let's try this. And I might fail and I might succeed, but okay. But I continuously practice. I get up, I try again. It takes a lot to discourage me to not keep trying if I'm interested in it. And I think that grit is really, and perseverance is what got me where I was. Because technically, if you were to read my IEP as a student, you would have not checked off all the boxes of things that I would have done. It would have, you would have been like, wow, this is a kid who can't read in third grade, and a kid who's not memorizing your times tables, and then got a master's in accounting, no less. So I think that there's a lot that's kind of, I think, something that really got me where I am today, is that I'll keep trying. So yeah.
I was getting emotional listening to your story because, it's the end of the marking period for me with my students. And, you didn't say my proudest moment was when I got 100 on a test, and it's, what are we measuring when kids come in and we ask them to perform certain skills? And I want to hear more of your story as far as your successes, and it makes me, or inspires me to be more mindful on what am I actually asking them to do, and how is that reflective of my teaching? What do I want them to leave my class being able to not only just do but feel about themselves?
One thing that I've been really impressed with at the school that we're at is at some point they added to the report cards was habits of mind. And they have a whole series of things: works cooperatively with kids, is a team player, has independent learning. And as a parent, and the one thing I appreciate is up till 8th grade, you get like progressing, emerging learner, mastered learner, exceeding learner. But I don't live in the meets grade level and exceeds grade level world. I live in progressing and emerging. And the areas my kids get meets and exceeds, the areas they get are the habits of mind, working cooperatively. They still struggle with independent work because they have learning struggles, but that area, the habits of mind, the working cooperatively, positive kid in class, like someone who knows how to like cope when things go wrong, like all those coping skills, those are the areas my kids meet and exceed. Those are where they come, because they are not going to come in the classroom scores, in those scores that they get, because it might someday happen at some point. I don't think that there's areas that I will never fully catch up in, but then I have all these other tools and skills that are different than other people, that are unique. And there are some things, like I said, where all of us have limitations, but having to say like, okay, I'm going to never get then and then right. I'm always going to pick the wrong one. Affect and effect, if it weren't for Grammarly, will always be a problem. But accepting that, but acknowledging, but I have these other tools. I know how to do these other things that are maybe more, that aren't measurable by school, because my kids' gifts are not scholastically measurable. And that's the hard thing, is that we really definitely, students like me and who we have different set of skills, we have different set of struggles. And the really hard thing that is hardest for me, that breaks my heart, are the kids who don't have support to learn the other side. I ask the teachers, I say, give me your struggling learners, give me your behavior issue kids. They're my people, because I see what's going on behind. I would work with the 3rd grade math group before I was in Heidi's class. And I remember there was a kid that was above my kid's grade level and he was acting out. And I just kind of said, that's not appropriate. But hey, multiplication is hard. Let's try another way to approach that problem. Because he was misbehaving, not because he wasn't capable or smart, but because he struggled in multiplication. And we would approach that problem so many different ways. I would try to approach it like, okay, let's try this way, and let's try this way, and let's make up a way, let's see what works. And then when I saw them trying it, I would praise that moment, because the reality is so many times people with those kids get trapped in this, they're misbehaving, that behavior needs to be curbed, not why are they misbehaving? What is going on underneath the surface that is causing this reaction that we need to address? And it's a hard thing, because it's a pecking game, it's a guessing game. But usually, because I was that student, I feel like I can speak their language, I can translate. I see what you're doing, I see why. So I'm going to address it. Still, you still want to say that's not appropriate, but then you kind of just jump into like, but let's solve this problem differently, and let's do this differently, because that's what they need. That's what is going on. And so, I mean, it's hard, because we still have to measure things. We still have to report how the child is growing and how they're progressing. But at the same time, we want to be building the other tools that will help them succeed in life. You could be the smartest one in the room, but no one wants to work with you if you're a jerk, because you're not working cooperatively. Nobody wants to collaborate with that person. And our jobs are so much about collaboration and working. So, yeah.
Yeah, and Cristina, I really enjoyed watching you work with children when you were in my classroom. And you would ask me for those that, were often giving a hard time with some of the subjects and whatnot. And the way you handled them was just beautiful. And I love that Jen said that she felt inspired by you, because if there was one word that I would choose to define you, inspiration is the word, or inspirational is the word. Because I feel like you provide a lot of that for everyone, including your own children. I remember the first day I met your son. I was brand new to the school. He didn't know me from anybody. He was still trying to figure out, like, who is this teacher? What are her expectations? What does she want from me? And I had them doing this drawing piece, and it wasn't perfect. And he was really frustrated about it. So I started, giving him a little growth mindset talk, and he's like, I know. And then he goes on and he tells me all this stuff. And I was like, holy cow, this kid. And then he just turned around and did it.
Yeah.
He got through it. And then he did it better than before, and it still wasn't perfect, but he recognizes the improvements, and
yeah.
he celebrates his improvement. So when you said my children aren't defined scholastically on the report card, actually they are, because your children may not look the same on the report card as a great majority. However, your children know that they went from this reading level to this reading level, and that deserves a celebration.
Oh yeah, we celebrate all those little wins. Yeah, I think I remember that story when you telling me he was frustrated with the task, and you were like, he knew this stuff. And because we've had conversations about it, we've had talks. It's been a big point to say, like, how are you growing? How are you improving? And focusing on that. I think he also did a lot of practice. There's so many people that pour that practice in, but I think one of the instructional aides that used to work with him said, your kids never blame me for things being hard. They don't like it's hard and that's frustrating. And children tend to take it out with the person that's in front of them because they don't want to acknowledge that's hard to deal with. That's why they act out. But she's like, your kids, they don't. They might get frustrated. You see the frustration. You're like, oh my gosh, this is annoying. But they don't. She's like, I don't feel like they're taking it out on me. And I mean, some that's still a skill. I won't deny they have their moments. They're still human. But the growth mindset stuff they lean into because we talk a lot about it. And I tell them how I feel very lucky that they were born when they were, because there are all these extra tools and information they have. And we celebrate even that. I said, you were born in a time when we have speech to text and we have text to speech and we have audiobooks easily accessible that maybe you had to get at the tape player and hope the library had. It was so hard to get. I don't think it even occurred to my family to get me audiobooks as a kid to compensate. They have access to so much information and tools that didn't exist for me. And let's celebrate when you were born, that there's more awareness and more knowledge of learning struggles, that there's talk about mindsets and growth mindset, and that this is something people know about. Let's celebrate that even, as well as celebrate your successes. And Heidi can know, because for 1 year, my son was not on the reading scale at all. And when he finally made it on, we celebrated. It was way off from where he was supposed to be, but we were like, you're on the scale. We are having ice cream or froyo or whatever treat you want. We are celebrating that you have improved so much that they can measure where your reading is. Because it's important to celebrate those little wins. They're wins. They're still a win. It's not anywhere near he should have been, but that's fine. Who cares? That's where he is. And that's an improvement. And so, yeah.
I remember celebrating that moment. I remember that day. Jen, I wanted to ask Cristina about where her passions with education are right now. But if you have something else, I saw you were ready to go.
Well, no, I mean, I was in just hearing the stories of her children's experience, which my whole thing is, yes, maybe we're adding some social emotional learning into the report cards, but strength-based report cards, like let's collect data on where your child has brilliance.
Yep.
And like the other stuff, like just trust that it will take care of itself. I'm teaching seniors right now. Is it important that they're able to cram in information about Hrothgar and Herod of Beowulf with the characters? No, like who cares? But trying to understand why we learn different time periods and getting excited about something and how does it relate to you? And I'm just trying to open them up and communicate. And I have kids telling me things in presentations and writings that I'm just so honored that they feel safe to share that with me. And it begins at the grade levels that you're talking about, is just creating that container of psychological safety that everyone has moments of brilliance and everyone struggles. Yeah. And why is it that certain ones get labels and accommodations and other ones get a fast track to like a gifted class? Like, it's just, to me, I don't understand. So that's what I was thinking.
And I think the hard thing is that there are certain things scholastically that we reward, that we experience that might be different than what we reward in the work life. And the really hard thing is giving them the tools that they need. But I agree with you on being able to highlight that, because my youngest, who has a lot of language fluency from language processing, when he's trying to pull a new content, he'll skip, he'll jump, and it's not quite stuttering, but you can see this disfluency. But when he does a presentation, he did a presentation that made his teacher get goosebumps at how much the class leaned in and was talking. He had a thing. He's like, how many of you would like to do this, this, and this? And then he brought out the tool he was presenting, and the kids were like, whoa. And there was so little disfluency. He had clearly practiced this in his head. He was presenting like a professional salesman. She's like, the whole class is, she's like taking pictures when the whole class is leaning in and like, wait, I just want to hear this attention. And she's like, nobody else's presentations were this interesting. And he was at the time 9. And like that, but that didn't, I mean, it does show up on our report card and it's talked about, but there's a salesman experience. There's all these ways that they have these skills, but it's hard because we're not like, it's not like you ask him what his reading or his language is. You go to an IEP meeting, it sounds very different, what you hear and what you see. And so it's tricky. We still need to have a measurable system, but what tools are we providing with them so that when they go in the workforce that they have what they need and they understand why. I think often when I was in the classroom, some of the kids would be like, because in 4th and 5th grade, they start learning about attitude. But it's healthy. They're wanting to have that sass and test it out in a safe space. And so often I think that sometimes I would explain like, okay, like 2 kids were paired together. They did not want to work together. I said, you know what? You're going to have to go to work and you're going to have to be paired with someone you don't like, you don't want to work with, but you have to figure out how to work with them. So I want you guys to practice that today on your assignment. Don't worry, try to get the work done, but just practice working with someone it's okay. You don't have to like each other. You don't have to play in the play and during recess. Try doing this project and practice working with someone who's different in a way you don't like. And they were like, okay. And then they did it and they did well. Like they were able to do it where I think beforehand they were like standing glaring at each other like, I don't want to work with you. This is horrible. Can I have someone else? But I explained to them, this is a skill that you will need when you grow up. And I don't expect you to have it because you're in 4th and 5th grade, but let's practice. Let's just try. What's the worst that happens? You do an assignment? Like it wasn't. And they did it. And just talking about why that skill is necessary, I think really is something that they need to understand because they're not going to intuitively get it.
Purpose. So Cristina, did we talk about your passion yet?
No, we haven't gotten there. I think we talked. That's the better. Sorry.
I feel like we came upon it, and then I was like,
we came upon it. So I think as you can see, learning and social emotional is a passion of mine. It's funny because I'm an accountant by trade, and I think my undergrad in psychology shines through every day. I remember interviewing and people would be like, undergrad in psychology, a master's in accounting, what is this? I do like research. I like to see how things go, but I think it started, I'm going to kind of tap on the other one and how did your journey on this topic begin, if that's okay, if they overlap. I think it all started not only just from me being a person of learning differentiations, having to be successful, but when I identified my children as that and having to start to understand them and understand myself. And so I had to start learning about myself and learning about dyslexia and learning about language processing and learning about ADHD and dysgraphia and all of that, because I wanted to understand them, but I wanted to understand me and understand why I am the way I am. And it's not something that you constantly do. You just kind of go through life. You just try to get through things, but then you have to parent. And I couldn't teach my son to read because I didn't know why that word was that way. I couldn't tell him because I just had memorized the shape. And if I got a new word, I was always afraid to help him read it because I was going to possibly say it wrong, because it happens for people like me. It still does, but I'm better. And so like spending time in that area. So I think that, but most of all, giving them the tools on the social emotional side, because I think that my ability to work the system, to positively manipulate it to my advantage. And for sometimes, I won't deny, I used it in not the best ways, but it got me through the system. It got me through all of this, being able to do that. So all of that process and all of that time, like learning about that is definitely one of my side passions for my job. And like I mentioned earlier, I think one of the things I'm wanting to do is to start documenting this for other people, because I can't be alone. I can't be the only person who experiences this. There's other parents, because genetics are strong, and there's other parents out there who have learning differentiation parenting parents. That's why I want to start something like Dyslexic Mom, so they have a tool, or even just another person who gets it. Because having somebody say, I understand the anxiety of going to a bridal shower and getting a word scramble because you're never going to do it. And they're staring at you like, why don't you want to do this? Don't you want a prize? No, I want sanity, so I'm not going to do this. And just those little things, or how we can support our learners and the people that are in our lives, how we can help them grow and thrive, and how we can support the team that's working with them, because that ability to support the team gives your children more support. Having conversations at home about how they treat the instructional aides in their classroom, or their teacher, having conversations about it's okay that you go to a separate room to learn sometimes, and talking about that, having those social emotional conversations to help them learn and just do that is important. I am very purposeful about showing transparency to the teachers and the parents at our school for a very particular reason. My learning difference kids look different as children than they do as adults. I look different. I think we were chatting earlier before the recording about how I'm very transparent intentionally, because when you just meet me on the street and I'm talking with the parents on the blacktop, a lot of parents have said, I would have never guessed you were one of those kids that went to the resource room or that was a struggling learner. I come across as a capable, intelligent adult, but I was that child. I was that learner. I was that kid who couldn't read in third grade, who couldn't do all these things and had to go to a special room to learn it. So showing them how that looks, I think, helps them build compassion for the other students in the room who are struggling, helps them talk to their kids about how they can have compassion. And I tell the kids, every book club I started with, I have dyslexia, in case you don't know, because for them, they were like, but you can read. And I'm like, now I can. And I read well, and I'm going to show you how to have a love of books because of that. I had to learn that. And having that transparency with them builds compassion and understanding as to that world. And I think that has always been a passion of mine in showing people that. And I'm just trying to constantly figure out what to do with that energy beyond my kids and my teachers and the staff that work with my kids. Because I think it's important to talk about, because I've lost count how many times I've had people in my life lean in and whisper, I'm like you. I'm a learning struggler too. Don't tell anybody. Don't let anybody know. Or I've had parents who are parenting gifted kids or neurotypical kids who are like, I have a question. My kid's struggling in this area. They lean in and they talk about their struggles, and we can brainstorm together and come up with an idea on how to support that other child that they might not have thought of. Because sometimes, two brains are better than one. And I think that opportunity and that chance to do that requires me being transparent. Now, it's bit me in the butt before. I've had people give me looks of like, can't you read? And I'm like, no, I can't, not anymore. I just gave it up. Like, it's just, you have those moments, but they're worth it for the moments that somebody leans in and talks about their fears and talks about their insecurities and shares that, or the compassion it builds with the kids mutually. Hold on, I need to get a drink. The compassion I see in the students that I work with, the compassion in my book club kids as they learn about me, and my family. I get water.
Well, as you're drinking and given a little bit of self-care, I love the word transparency for so many reasons. And you didn't say this word, but what I keep on hearing in your words is empathy. You are able to empathize with, not every child is this, cookie cutter type thing. And I was kind of smiling before, and I wanted people to understand, like when you were saying about you could never do the scrambles. Yeah, I was smiling because I would always say, like, I can do Jeopardy because he reads the questions and then I could answer it, but I could never do Wheel of Fortune.
Yep.
Like, I just can't see it. I can't see it. I'm an English teacher, but I just can't see the fill in the blank for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And for what I didn't necessarily feel less than because of that, but I just kind of thought it as like a quirk, well, I'm quirky, I can totally, sing all of the Cole Porter songs. I can memorize all of those things, but I can't like see blank T. I'm like, I don't know. Is it caught? Is it cat? Is it cut? Like, and put it in a sentence. I'm like, I can't even do it. So, just that grace to accept differences and the empathy to realize that everyone struggles in some way. And, your perspective is so refreshing and inspiring, and hoping that a lot of educators are hearing this and watching this. I'm wondering, it kind of leads, I was kind of free forming that, but it's a good segue into the question that if you were to go into an elevator with someone and you wanted to share your passion about this topic, who would you love to be in an elevator with, and what would you love to share with them?
So that's funny, because I heard this as if you could blow someone's mind. Like, I kind of thought of what person would I want to meet was the first thing that came into mind. And the person that comes into mind is Brene Brown. And the reason is, aside from her books are amazing, they're what has, I listen with the audiobooks I listen to at night to keep me sane during all of this shelter in place and everything, and anytime. But most of all, she touches on something that's very real to a lot of learning strugglers, and that's shame. Shame is something that, even like, I am not a shame-based parent. We don't use that as a tool in our house, but my kids have shame struggles because they exist in a world where it just exists. And so I think being able to talk with her and share about how much her words have helped me figure out tools to support my learners and myself. I mean, it's interesting to see the onion of shame that kids like me experience. And I see in the kids in the classroom, and I see it's, even as an adult, I'm realizing more and more the layers that come off of, like, as soon as I've shed a layer, there's another one that's going to make people cry if I were to share it. And I think it's just a truth. It's a reality. But I love that she talks about it, gives tools to it, talks about the importance. But the biggest thing she brings up is the importance of vulnerability and empathy and compassion in dealing with others that are anybody. And that's with everybody on the neurodiverse scale, everybody in every learning situation. I think most of all, I just want to thank her and ask her, hey, do you have any extra tools that you can give? Can you make a little subsection for people with learning differences? Because we need a little extra oomph. I'm sure it's not that different, but still, I think about, like I said, the reason for my transparency is, and some people give you looks, is there are kids experiencing shame, and having them see an adult who's they like. I mean, usually when I'm in the classroom, I'm a friendly person, I'm fun, I have lots of sarcasm, I can take a joke, and I'm pretty hard to offend. So most of the kids don't hate me, even if I'm having to play the disciplinary. And I think they know that they can say, oh, she's had these struggles. Maybe I don't need to be as ashamed about them. Maybe I don't need to be the only one. I'm most of all trying to figure out how to keep my kids from experiencing that depth that comes with this. So they have less onion layers to peel away than I have, less layers to this shame that they have. And I still, like I said, I think discover more as I go. The fact that I still walk into a room and assume I'm going to be the dumbest one, so I have to over prepare. I have a little Word document I might be checking at where I type some of my thoughts in my notes, because I was like, gotta be prepared. I can't jump into this without preparation. And I think about things, and I walk into all situations. I have been doing writer's workshop with my older son's class, and I was so anxious. I asked his teacher, I'm like, can you give me books to study? Because I'm horrible at writing. It's not my gift. And then, like, I'll write an email for the group or the class, and she'll be like, wait, you said you're horrible at writing? I had my performance review, and one of my highlights was, she's great at writing emails, really amazing communicator. And I was like, I thought that was my weakness, but I work at it because, and I don't see that because I have that chip. That, I mean, it's it's still hard to hear people saying, you're great, you're inspirational, because I'm just assuming I'm so flawed and broken, I just have to constantly level up. But that's part of what came with this. That's baggage that we're left carrying. That's unfortunate and hard. But hearing Brene Brown's words about how everybody experiences this and how to cope with it and how to live life with it is something that, how to argue with it, how to teach with this, how to work with my kids with this, is what always inspires me, and constantly is like, okay, I can breathe a little clearer now because somebody understands how this is. And so, yeah, I don't know if that answers the question. I don't know if I interpreted the question right.
What I love about it is, I think you're the first person who was so positive with that question, because you wanted to just express thanks.
Yeah.
And at the same time, you've also had so many struggles. And what I love is that you are so positive, you are so uplifting, you're so inspiring. And that's not to say that I'm glossing over. I can hear nuggets of your pain
Mhm.
when you were younger, and yet that does not eclipse this light that you shine.
Thank you. But I didn't really, no, I mean, I just saw that as something positive, because it was, who would you want to? And that's one person in my life I'm always like, I would love to just, her words hit. And so I love how real and raw her words are. They're real and raw. And that's, even in the hardest moments, I think that that realness is what's going to transpose. And I think that Heidi has definitely experienced seeing that in my children. They're transparent about when it's hard. They're real about it, because I think it's so hard, because you are, upside down, belly exposed, but it's worth it. The benefit is so outweighs the negatively. And I think that's the thing that we have to always keep focusing on it. It's always trying to find how to get through that place in that moment, because as cheesy it sounds, find that my dad used to always say, find the silver lining in the cloud. Both my parents modeled that and practiced that. And I know they were always worried about me more than my sister. My sister tested as gifted and was a scholastic thriver. I call them, there's gliders and grinders, those that just scholastically glide. It just clicks with them. And they still work hard, because I think the hard thing is people misunderstand that people who get it, they think that they aren't working hard, because they are. But it just flows. It just kind of glides through it. But then there's the grinders. We work hard, but we have to do 3 times as much work to get to the same place as the glider. And both can be equally hard workers, but some it just clicks, and some it's just, okay, I got to push against this wall, and I've got to move this wall, and it's going to be a lot of work, and it's going to be hard. And then inevitably it'll maybe crumble. We'll find the weak point and it will fall down. And so it's really this constant back and forth battle, and finding that place and finding where you are and how you can support that, but how you can get through it, because we can. And it's going to take work. It's going to suck sometimes, but you got to keep going, because that's going to be when you get that moment. That's the grit. That's the part that, because it's hard usually to keep going. You just have to fail a few times if you work hard enough. That's not always how it works with us. And I'm having to say to my kids sometimes, yeah, this sucks, and this is hard, and it'll take time. You can't measure yourself against your classmates, because they've been reading since probably kindergarten or first grade, and your brain is taking longer, and that's okay. You'll get there. It'll look different. Let's just keep chipping away, because we've got a big wall or a mountain in front of us, and we're going to get there. But I think both my parents modeled a lot of that, even though maybe behind the scenes they were far more worried than they were willing to acknowledge to me. But they kept being positive. They kept saying, you can do this, and told me and tried to build the tools with the limited information that was accessible for the time. And then, now it's so much more accessible. So I'm grateful for that. But I think it's just what you have to do to get there. Otherwise, you're just going to be sitting in a hole. But mostly we'll get it there together, I think, is the really thing to focus on. If we're not coming together to uplift each other and talk about it, which you guys are doing and we're doing right now, we're not going to get there. There's an amazing video that someone created that I love called I Am Dyslexic. And it's a video that shows more than anything else how it feels to an adult. The first time I saw it, I'm not a crier. I full on cried. I was like, finally someone showed it in the video. And there is a moment that he exhibits. It's the person, the character in the story is climbing a mountain of books, but just paper and books everywhere. But there is a moment where the child is in a pit and sad and doesn't see a way to get out. And how they do is another person throws them a rope. And I think that's exactly how it is for a lot of us in general, but especially learning strugglers. So we have our dark moments. We all do. We're all going to have those moments in the pit. And the most we can do is someone can say, this sucks. Yeah, this is really sucky, but I'm going to throw you a rope. I'm going to pull you out and we'll try again. And that's all we can do in those situations, is acknowledge that you're in this hard place and then help that person up with it, work with them to get there. And I think that's the only way to get there. It's the only way you're going to be able to get there. And that's, I think, why I like to be transparent and talk about it, because sometimes those kids are stuck there for a while before someone says that to them. And that's the part that breaks my heart more than anything, is the kids where because they're harder, because they're pricklier, because they're a bit more of a cactus in their behavior, because they've built a defense system, because it's been so hard for so long. They just want someone to come alongside them, anyone, and say, this sucks. Yeah, it sucks that comes more easily to that person and that you have to work harder, and that's not fun. But I'm going to give you a rope. I'm going to tell you about how we can get there, and we're going to get out together. And I think you guys get a chance to do that so much as teachers. It's a wonderful thing, an opportunity you have, and a blessing, which is why I think teachers are so underappreciated, which is why I throw my support at them, because they're with me, handing my children the rope, helping them pull up and out. The teachers, the resource team, because I'm lucky enough to get that access, the instructional aides, they're all there lifting that child up. And yeah.
Yeah, so Cristina, the conversations with you are so rich. I was watching Jen earlier when you were talking about gliders and grinders, and her face just lit up and she started taking notes, and I'm like, yeah, I could be taking notes the whole time. And I'm going to try to articulate this because there's so much in the last several minutes that I pulled out from what you said, starting with shame, when we were talking about Brene Brown and how everybody experiences shame, all the way to the resources that you have and the access your children have to teachers who hand them the rope and, classroom aides and whatnot. All of that together leads me into, like, how do we bring this type of conversation into schools so that we can do the work that's needed to support everybody? I think about shame and how you were telling us that your older child, who I already knew, wasn't on the reading scale at the beginning of his time in my class. I had children who were reading at a high school level, and this was a 4th grade class, right? So the spectrum was really large, and I could see shame in that classroom. I could see a level of arrogance from some students and putting shame down on another student, because shame rolls downhill, as we know. And what I noticed from those kids who were reading at like a much higher level and were handing down the shame, there was shame coming to them too, from somewhere. So and I heard Jen talk about empathy, right? She had mentioned to you that in the way you were talking about students working with each other, and there's empathy there. But I feel like there's still a lot more we can do, and knowing your kids and all the struggles that they've had, and they don't wash that shame down.
Not as much, no.
No, and they don't put it on the aide, right? They don't do that kind of thing because of the way you've taught them, because of the modeling you've had for them, because of the way your parents worked with you and were so positive with you. So how do we bring that conversation not only into the schools, but into other people's homes? How do we help parents raise their children in a way that we can have empathy? Everybody has the opportunity to throw everyone else a rope. And at any given moment, everybody's going to need a rope, you know? So how do we have those conversations?
And that's the hard thing, because I think that, like, you hit so many points as to what the issue is. I mean, the issue comes in multiple layers, from having to battle your own demons as a parent and as a person, having to do the work as well as teaching the staff and the other people to understand. And I think the main thing it comes down to is building compassion and understanding. Our school was able to, right before we were in shelter in the place, we led the staff was doing a learning disability simulation. Mm-hmm. And then we were going to do it for the parents and have like the parents do a workshop of a learning disability simulation. And what was amazing was it wasn't just a simulation and you do the work. The proctors, the leaders in the group, behaved like teachers, and said things. And there were really interesting, empathetic, eye-opening moments where teachers looked up and you could just see, oh, come on their head. And I think it's hard because it's so very hard if you're not, like, I've lost count how many times my husband's like, can you explain this to me about dyslexics? I want to understand my child and myself and my wife and understand this. And he's asking questions, and some of it I can answer and some of it I can't. But I watched this experience, and going through a learning disability simulation or learning differentiation, either way, it was a dyslexic simulation. As a dyslexic, was fascinating. And it was amazing to watch other people go through it. Because they asked us to be the students we were. So I broke some of the rules because that's what we do. You can call them modifications. My generation might have called them something different. But I broke the rules. So they'd say, do this activity. And I was like, I would think in my head, okay, I can't do that. How can I modify this with who I am? And I modified it. So I was successful. I was one of these scholastic thrivers, which was very uncomfortable for me. And so the person leading the group, we were doing an activity of writing with a mirror that was so hard. Everybody was struggling with this, but I kind of created a modification and did it first. And the proctor, the person leading the group, said, everybody, Cristina finished early. And could you guys please speed up? Because I don't think she should be penalized for the fact that you guys are moving so slowly. And it was something like that, which sounds like a harmless thing. Like, I don't think Cristina should be penalized because she finished early and everybody's moving so slowly. Could you speed up? And one person that was struggling so aggressively on this just looked up and just went, oh, and she experienced that feeling. She didn't just see it. She understood, oh, that's how that feels to that student. I did not realize that. And you realize these subtle little things that we say that are unintentionally wounding. And we're human, we're flawed, we're learning, we're all going to do this. But the biggest thing is giving people the opportunity to have that moment and reminding them. Most often, when you Google successful people with learning disabilities, you get a list of actors, which is amazing. Don't get me wrong. I'm so grateful for the face front that they get to be. But I want to know what business people, what lawyers, what successful people, I want to know everybody that has succeeded, because everybody has a struggle that they overcome. I want to hear that story. Share those stories in general, because by sharing those stories and getting people to experience what it's like, that builds the compassion and the empathy to create the change. Because the root of the change has to be in the person. You can train people how to do that, but they're not going to fully understand why till they experience it. It was amazing for me to witness. It was actually kind of freeing for me to witness, because again, I broke the rules because I realized the rules didn't work for me. And I did the modifications that would have naturally come from my IEP and such. And then I was all of a sudden, they were like, wow, I was getting all the praise. And a part of me felt like I was an imposter. I kept wanting to say, I think I cheated. Like I broke the rules. And I really didn't. Upon reflection, I modified it. I just created the modifications that exist now to meet where I am. And I think that will open teachers' eyes to realize, like, I can still give a scramble word to majority of the class for fun, but maybe I should have a couple of backup assignments for that student that hates the word scramble, and it shouldn't be a crossword puzzle. Like just a searcher word. We can do searcher words. It takes us longer to find them, but we can do them. Or have a couple of backup activities you're willing to do for the child that, okay, you can do this, this, or this, but they're all the same, working on spelling and writing. And then that child can experience that opportunity to do something different instead of asking them to stay in the box that you know and stay in that place. And I think that's it. You've got to just touch the heart for change to happen, because then they'll get it. And I suspect that one teacher I mean, there were other people in the room having aha moments, but that one moment really stood out to me, that I have no doubt that teacher's teaching method changed a little because of that experience, that they modified some of their tools because of that experience. It touched them profoundly in understanding their students better. And that's, I think, the way to get people to experience it, because they don't realize it. You can't understand what it's like to have a cold if you've never had a flu. You don't understand what it's like to have a headache. You've never had a headache. How can you understand a migraine? And that's really the root of it. And so I don't know if that makes sense, but
Well, again, it's the empathy.
it is.
It's understanding the other person's perspective. And when I was hearing you talk about, that role-playing activity, for the lack of a better word, it reminds me of with, they used to call it ESL, then it was ELL, and it's EDL. I mean, it keeps on changing as they're trying to find a more appropriate and graceful term.
Yeah.
Putting native speakers of English through an exercise on what it's like to not know that language. And, my husband is from another country, and, our first date, that was a hoot because he was really like, slogging through, and he was sweating, and he's like, I can't tell if it was the Indian food I was eating or if it was me trying to speak English with you. But, to have that empathy of what it's like,
Yeah.
is so powerful. So I'm glad you were able to highlight that. So thank you.
And I think, like you said, this translates across, not just for children with learning differentiations, but kids who English isn't their native language, and giving them a simulation to see what that is like. Children who we have such a spectrum. One of the benefits, I think, nowadays is we acknowledge there's a spectrum of children and their gifts and what they have to bring. We're more aware of the depth and breadth of that. We have more access to information about how the brain works and why, but also more understanding that they still have benefits and successes. And I think, though, I can't imagine I know how hard it was for me to grow up. And I think about those that came before me to grow up with dyslexia or learning disabilities or struggles. And the things they had to do and the moments they had of success makes me so much more impressed, because they had such a bigger mountain to climb. But we're so great. I'm so grateful that we do have that. We have more access to information to share with people that we're not just a little box where that fits for. We don't have to fit everybody in this little box. We can expand it. And the reality is those activities that work for the neurodiverse work for everyone. I was researching sensory issues for one of my children, and I tested it on some kids that were neurotypical in my math group. They were feeling really wiggly. I was like, okay, feeling really wiggly. We're going to pull their hands like this. We're going to go like this, and we're going to squeeze, breathe. And then we're going to take a deep breath. And then afterwards, they were all super focused. And that was one of the tools I'd read about, like this activity where you hug yourself in this funny way and you take deep breaths during it. And I did it with them, and they all became more focused. So adding these modifications is not going to affect the gifted, thriving learners. It's just going to enrich their experience and give them extra tools.
Yeah. Hey, Cristina, I really appreciate you coming and sharing your story so that we could get the word out. And like I said, just so rich. It would be great to, continue this conversation and to know that, you're part of like making change in your children's school, and bringing activities like that role play to the staff. I mean, that's just incredible that you are such an advocate for not just your own children, but for all children of all learning types. So I appreciate that. What questions do you have for Jen and I?
So I was trying to think about that. And I think it's really great, all the like social emotional stuff you're bringing. That's such an awesome thing. And the conversations you're having with people online as well to share that. But I guess it always comes back to how to support kids like me. So how are you guys going to create content that also can be given to the resource team, or touch on that moment and touch on those kids? And what point of entry do you see? What way do you think even also how those parents like me can bring the attention to the teachers and the staff to support their kids? Because I think the hardest thing is we are always trying to find health. I think parents like me are trying to advocate for our kids and model advocacy. But how do we do it without being like, it's juggling that mama bear in us? And how do we do it with a way that increases that mindfulness but supports everybody on both sides? That makes sense. That's kind of a big question. Sorry.
No, I immediately it was something that I thought of when you were talking about that simulation. And it's going to sound strange, but that's one thing I'm grateful for with the COVID situation, with the learning from home remote modules, is I started teaching completely differently, because I would push out something on Monday morning. Here's the suggested timeline, do it by Friday. And I also know, having teaching seniors, they're raising their siblings, they're doing 20 hours a week.
Yeah.
And it's like, you know what? Accommodations shouldn't be accommodations for certain students. I think it's just how to treat people with grace and dignity.
Yeah.
Do you need more time? Oh, you actually want to do the project, you just need more time. Yes. Can I resubmit? You mean you're actually going to read my feedback and like want to do it better?
Yeah.
Yes. Like it's just student-centered learning, which means that you just honor every single student. And it doesn't mean that you need to have 130 IEPs. It is just trauma responsive, non-neurotypical or neurodivergent accommodations, where you're just understanding that everybody deserves an opportunity to thrive.
Sure.
And to create a safe container where they can self-advocate, because you're their soft place to fall. You are just all about collecting data that shows their strengths.
Yeah.
So they know the best place to go for the next step. If I know that you were talking about, you're an accountant and math, and if math is not my strength, well, guess what? Your son who had people on the edge of their seat, like, oh my gosh, like most people, that is like, they'll do anything to get out of public speaking.
Yeah.
That is a win. What can we do more about that? Like, I'm excited. What do you want to do next? And get them excited about that. So, I don't know if that answers the question, but, how to bring that conversation and how to have that advocacy is, if we can take education to that in the future, where it is just focused on celebrating strengths, understanding every student, and maybe if parents understood that that's what education is about, it would be less adversarial. It's less us versus them. And that, we love discovering what gets kids excited to learn.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jen, you tapped into some of my thoughts too. Cristina, you asked about how could we create content, or what content could we create that would, support this for children and advocacy and all that. And my first thought was, well, we just need to have education be different than it's been. We can't have this 1900 style of factory learning. There's no way to advocate for anybody in that situation. That's just, cookie cutter. And the way to make those changes is to change the schools, right? Not just one teacher, not just one lesson, but the actual schools and how we function, and to make it more brain-based and more student-driven. And not just say that it's student-driven because students had the opportunity to fill out a poll, you know, but actually find what their interests are, because that's how they're going to be engaged. And they're going to go off their strengths, and then they're going to have to use some of their weaknesses to help them build on those strengths. So they get all of it anyway. It's not like we're just going to have, you know, a kid who's good at public speaking only do public speaking. They're still going to have to do the reading, the writing, and the math too, right? It all goes together. So I think, you know, working on the leaders that can make the changes, because, you know, as a teacher from the bottom, I couldn't make any changes. I could make a change in my own classroom with my door closed and just do my best, but that didn't change the system. So, you know, really working on the people who can change the system, you know, superintendents and principals, and even people at the government level, you know, political level, and helping them to realize. And I think a lot of those simulations, you know, really having people feel it and understand it so that they can see why and how to make the changes. The other thing that came to mind was self-advocacy. You talked about self-advocacy with children, and you know, having been in my class for 2 years, I teach my students to have a lot of self-awareness. I teach them how to have self-empathy and self-care, which then lends itself to empathy for others. And then I teach them how to have conversations and how to problem solve in a kind and polite way. And it works. I mean, I saw it. I saw the language change. I saw my students interacting with each other differently. I saw them solving their own problems. And I feel like when students can feel comfortable to have the skill set to be able to have a voice, then they have that self-advocacy. So teaching that in the classroom is going to be essential. And as a parent interacting with their teachers, I mean, you always come in as a supporter, and that's basically what you are. You're a supporter. You're there to support the teacher. You're there to support all the kids, not just yours, all the kids.
I do like to do that.
And you do, right? And you come with a wide breadth of knowledge as well, but you don't put that on the teacher on day one, right? You build a relationship and you're just there to serve. And after a while, as you're serving, you're like, well, I have this I could add. What do you think about that? And you don't come in like pushing, or there's never any tension between you and the teacher. And it builds a really nice relationship, and it becomes a collaborative relationship, which is what learning is all about. Mm-hmm. And the collaboration needs to come from, you know, the parents at home, to the children, to the teacher, to the admin, to the whole community. It's a whole group effort, the village. So I think you do that really well. And so if parents want to be advocates for their children, I think they need to go in and look at their teachers as somebody who's also supporting their children, and not come at it with you know, we have a problem.
And it's hard because I think a lot of people forget that you have to build that relationship. You can't come in and think that somebody's going to be ready to invest in your words till you've done the work. So you've gotten to know them. But also I think like, it's hard because they're your kids. And I feel like as a parent, there's this interesting battle between mom heart and my brain. It happens before every IEP meeting, and you get that IEP and you read it, and it sounds very different than your child because there's a format, there's a structure, or you read a report card, or you see that, and your mom heart wants to run in like a mama bear and hug them and protect them and fight their battles and be like, this is how, and you want, that's where you want, because we're human and we're passionate and we love our children. But learning to also be like, okay, instead of like, you're not doing this right, it's like, how can we together? And I think that's the only way we're really going to be able to support any child. And even like you said, I love being able to get to know the kids and have fun with them. I had a writers group yesterday that I texted the mom, oh my gosh, your son was beautifully derailing the conversation with sarcasm, but we needed that levity. It was needed. So I let it happen, but it was so fun. And it was silly, and we had a good connection moment, and your child's humor is hilarious to me. but just even having those connected moments where we can share with each other those things that we see in ourselves and in our other people's children, and how that connects. And sorry, my brain tends to wander, especially as the day goes on. But I think it's hard because so often it's about me and my child instead of we. And you really touched on that, the sense that like I approach every teacher as if they are a part of the team. We are a team together. We will figure out how to support this child, and we will figure out how to do this. And it's never just me. My children are where they are, and it's never just about me. It's about the teachers and the resource team, and even the people expanding that, their grandparents and friends in the community and the other kids. It's like we are a big group together. And that's what shapes who we get to be and how that child will succeed. So I can't imagine not coming into it as in like, how can we do this together? But I understand why it's hard at the same time. I understand why it's a battle for parents to take a breath and be like, it's not a battlefield. It's a team. It's hard.
Well, and I was saying before about talking about the strengths, and Heidi was like gently inserting, well, we need to make sure that they can do all skills.
Yeah.
Right. And it's not like, oh, well, we don't have high expectations in that area. It's not about that. And at the same time, IEP meetings, paperwork, can it be done through a growth mindset, through strength-based? Yeah. And having those very difficult conversations sometimes in ways that highlights that whole child and not just their struggles, or their strength through their struggles.
And that's the hard thing, because so often IEP kids were defined by our struggles. We're categorized. We get in the system by our struggles. I've had to tell parents, lean into that label that they've given, because that label will get them what they need. It's not who your child is. It is not who I am or who I was as a student, but it's about giving them the support and the tools to take that struggling area and bridge the gap. I think about my time in the system and the amazing teachers that I've worked with, one of which is still alive and talks to my mom and sends Christmas cards. Mm-hmm. That's how big the impact was. Another one, before her death, I was able to bring her balloons when she won Teacher of the Year, and tell her, look how far I've gone. Look at the necklace I still have. Mm-hmm. I think about, but the hard thing is we are still categorizing these kids, but that's how they get in the system. That's how they get the support that they need. So the question really is, how can we integrate the support before there's that break? Because I think the hardest thing is there are kids who might be able to avoid the system if the system could step in sooner. You have to wait till a child is 2 years behind before you can step in. How long does that child, what about the kid that just stays just above the mark? That's always 1.5 years behind, but never enough to qualify. How do we support those kids? How do we get those kids in the loop? Or what about the kids who are scholastically just really, really good, but don't know how to have empathy and compassion? Because like Heidi said, they're coming into the equation with this, I still have to thrive and be better. I'm never going to be good enough, even though they were reading at a high school level and they were doing that. How do we combat that? And I agree, it's getting the way we approach that learning, the way we approach the teaching, and how we as a group can change that for all of the students, because every student benefits from this diversity. Every student benefits. One of the great things I love about my kids' school is they do a really great job supporting both ends of the spectrum. Kids like my sister who were gifted and weren't getting challenged enough in the day-to-day classroom, and kids who were right in the middle, right where they like exactly where we expected them to be, and then the kids that were struggling. They tried to create programs, math intervention programs, and creating Barton tutoring, which has been amazing for my son to be able to have. He gets Barton and he gets resource time. That has been huge. I went through Barton as a student, which people are always like, what? And I was like, no, I needed to relearn to read. But like finding those supports before they get in the system, I think is going to be a huge change that's needed. But how do we do that is, I guess, the constant. But I love that you guys are having these conversations, that you guys are asking the question, that you're reaching out and trying to tab those conversations, because That's where that happens. It's not going to happen if we're not being transparent and talking about it. It's not going to happen if we're not asking, is this the best way to do this? How can we do it better?
And I know, Cristina, that you are always open to talking to people about how they can support their own child who may have some learning differences. I've had some friends even call you. I even have a friend who just randomly met you. And then you guys made the connection that you knew me. So yeah. But and I see that you have your new email down there on your name,
Yes,
the Dyslexic Mom Online at Gmail. Is that the best way for people to get a hold of you?
For now, yeah, that would be the best way. It's an active email. We're still figuring out websites and starting the YouTube channel. It's still kind of new. We're going to record some stuff soon so that we can start posting, because I'd like to be able to share with people. I think there's a lot to be said about what it's like, a lot for people to hear that like you said, the only way is by sharing, because I think that's the moment people lean in. I did meet one of Heidi's great friends who in a lobby, and then we were like, oh my gosh, we know Heidi. Isn't she great? And because we had weeks of just sitting in a lobby, our kids having a session at the same time, just started chatting and getting to know each other and building a relationship. But in that process, being transparent and talking about our kids and talking about, like, how are my kids struggling with this? Me too. And just hearing you're not alone. Because I think the hard thing is we get put in a bubble of shame. We get put in this place of where we're not quite, like, a bubble of just not being able to talk about it. But we just need to just be okay with that. So yeah, I'm hoping that soon we'll have more videos, and I'll have the bandwidth while I'm working, supporting my kids, just all that stuff.
So I'm really excited to see your YouTube channel come up. And, Jen and I, we have this YouTube channel, and we also have our own websites. I'm at eqqeconsulting.com, and Jen is at genformation.com. If you want to send us some of your videos, we can put those on our sites and our social media. We'd love to share that with you, and get your word out. In addition to that, maybe the people who are subscribing down below, we'd love to have as many subscribers as possible. Maybe those people will also pop over to your site and subscribe over there. I know I will.
And feel free in the comments to add any questions you would want to know from somebody in my situation, someone like me, because it's only through people asking questions that we can start answering some of them. And maybe, like, I'm in a very unusual situation. I'm an adult who can give you perspective, who's not just because the kids can't. They don't have that opportunity. But ask how we're gonna, and tell us what you're experiencing too, because I'd love to hear that too.
Well, as we end this talk, Jen always likes to take a screenshot with our mugs, and she has a hard time holding hers up. She could do it right now just so we could get a thumbnail of it at the end, but she has a hard time for the final thing because she's got to take the click. So here we go.
3, 2, 1. There we are.
Awesome.
Got it.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.